All right, so it's a cold, wintry morning here in Tacoma. It finally snowed, which has been the first time it snowed in a very, very long time. It's been over a year since we actually had any snow whatsoever. I mean, not even nothing blowing in the air. So it's great. The kids are actually out of school because school shut down. However, UW in Tacoma is still open. UW in Seattle and in Bothell are closed, but University of Washington in Tacoma is still open, which is crazy because underneath the snow streets is ice. So, and I don't think that we really have salt trucks. If we do, they're not like other places. You know, in Indianapolis, they have a bunch of salt trucks, and they have private contractors who go out and do stuff. Not really here, because we don't get a lot of snow and ice, believe it or not. Even though we're the northernmost crop of cities in the country, we really don't get a lot of snow here. But anyhow, it's all due to the mountains. It's not what this is about. This is about Tacoma getting a proposed sports village. Okay? Now, I did a video that was just released talking about the Tacoma Rain, which is basically the highest level of professional soccer for women. And then, of course, the Tacoma Defiance, which is the minor league. It's the farm team, if you will, of the Major League Soccer Sounders up in Seattle. So they both teams have decided to come down. Now, last year's, the Sounders 2 is what they were called before they were called the Tacoma Defiance. And they had played in Tacoma, I believe. And then they decided to come down here. Just a better facility. If you look at Cheney, I've been saying it Cheney, but it's Cheney. If you look at Cheney Stadium, it's just a by far better facility. It's been upgraded by the city. The city dumped $30 million into that facility. So when you look at that and you look at the amount of stuff that's available to do, and then you look at just everything, the facility is by far better than any other facility outside of the major league fields. You're not going to find anything better at Starfield, which is kind of run down, at Memorial Stadium up in Seattle, which is where the Rain played. It's just hideous. I think they're going to tear it down because there's no money that's been allocated to refurb it. They thought about it, but it's just not happening. So that left Tacoma as being the place to go to, and a lot of people up in Seattle are upset that they lost their professional soccer team. Now keep in mind, only big cities have had the women's professional soccer. Okay, and it's expanding, and it's expanding slowly, but all these expansions occur right in the big cities, typically. And so one of them is played in Sandy, Utah, I believe, which is right outside of Salt Lake. But most of them are played in bigger cities. And so people up in Seattle are a little bit upset, but at the same time, you can't really build any sort of minor league field up in Seattle. Financially, it doesn't make sense. And when you try to play in the CenturyLink, which would be more than adequate for such a team, this is a venue that can hold almost 70,000 people, but it's expensive. And at the same time, you have to also keep in mind that the MLS team Sounders also play there. So you're going to have to be jockeying. If you're a professional soccer team, the women professional, they would have to jockey for time slots. So it just doesn't make any sense. When you look at Cheney, it makes a lot of sense because you have two minor league teams, soccer teams that will be playing there also. It's a baseball field, but they can convert it easily to hold soccer. But you're working within each other. You're working within the schedule. One of the things that has not been really talked about but was proposed last year is the Sports Village Project. Okay, now I didn't know much about this until I saw a little bit in the press report whenever the Rain announced that they were going to come down to Tacoma. There hasn't been a lot in the news. There hasn't been a lot talked about it. But I've talked about before that HershNoeie Stadium, to me, is kind of far out. And the Sound Transit is going to build a light rail line eventually connecting downtown all the way out to Tacoma Community College, which is about 4 miles away from downtown. HershNoeie Stadium is not that far from where 19th Street is. I mean, it's actually one of the main streets in front of it. So the stop is not going to go directly in there. You're going to have to do some walking, obviously, to get to the light rail stop. But you'll be able to get to downtown without having to really worry about it. Right now, you have to basically use your car. Now, this line is not going to be completed until 2041, which is ridiculous that Sound Transit would take that long to build basically a streetcar. That's a totally different argument, but I think it's stupid. Given this and other announcements, it may, hopefully, the city would push them to build faster and put this project a little bit ahead, because again, streetcar construction lines are not that difficult, and they're a lot faster than the true light rail systems. But anyway, so there is it's called Heidelberg Sports Village Project, and the reason why the mayor of Tacoma said she knows she has to get through a feasibility study for this new soccer stadium, people were scratching their heads saying, well, why is there so much announcements that these two soccer teams are coming down here to play at one stadium? HershNoeie Field, designed for baseball, minor league baseball, holds about 6,500 people, which is not a lot, but it holds 6,500 people, and it's going to have 3 teams playing out of it. Now, it's not ideal for soccer, but it can handle soccer, and it's by far a big upgrade from what they've had before. But a lot of people were saying, you can't promise them a stadium and there's still a feasibility study out there. However, when you look at the people behind this, you had the mayor of Tacoma, and then you had the Pierce County executive. Both are the leaders of the community. So the Pierce County executive is kind of like the mayor of the county. Both of them are saying they're going to get the job done as far as the stadium. Now, it's probably pretty much a guarantee, because obviously for them to say, yeah, it's going to be done, it's like a done deal, almost, is what they're saying coming out of their mouth. Pretty much we're going to get the soccer stadium without, because the feasibility study is not done. But with those two saying what they said, I don't think it matters, even if the feasibility study came back and said that the soccer stadium is going to cost much more than what they thought. It's pretty much a done deal. And I say that because the mayor was extremely happy that the fact that we got a female soccer team, a professional female soccer team down here in Tacoma. So it's perfect. Now, let's take a look at this a little bit more and kind of unpack this whole entire project. The reason why the feasibility study is going to take so long is because this entire sports village is going to be a complex of housing and retail as well. Okay, so it's not just a feasibility study on just the stadium and saying if that makes sense. This is a project that has about 5 or 6 different individuals paying for this project. And some of them are in, where was I? Because I was looking at the feasibility study, the partners behind this, the companies that are behind this. 2 of them are out of Chicago, Illinois. 2 of these companies are out of Chicago, Illinois. You have 2 that are out of Tacoma. And then you have 1 that is out of Seattle. And it gives their email address and contact information. And of course, Metro Parks Tacoma is behind this too, because that's land that Metro Parks Tacoma has. This entire complex is going to incorporate a nearby high school, which all this land at one point in time was going to be the high school. They didn't need all of it. So now the Rainiers, they play at HershNoeie Stadium, which is the minor league baseball team. But there's parking lots that are not used. We're talking about 10 acres. That's not really used that much. So now what they're going to do is basically build development based on what this is saying on those parking lots. But you're still, when you look at the area, it's a lot of green. Like you could, even if they didn't use the parking lots, they could still build the stadium and then also build this complex, which is going to be about 10 acres of development. So it's going to be called the Heidelberg Sports Village Project, and the mixed-use commercial development is going to be called the Projects. Now, I don't know how I feel about the name, the Projects, because when I hear the Projects, that reminds me of places back in my hometown and other places that were the Projects. And so it's not really a name that's kind of cohesive to prosperity typically. But anyway, so they're developing this, and Foss High School is right there. So they're going to try to incorporate this entire project as being this kind of quasi-semi entertainment district, if you will. So they're using the fact that you have a highway running on one side. Cheney Stadium kind of overlooks the highway. You then also will have the new minor league soccer team stadium that's being built. There's already 2 teams that will be playing out of that. A lot of money is being put behind that. You have a medical facility that will actually put in a clinic that's not only open to the teams, so they can use it for their players who get injured, but also the community. So you already have a medical component to that. And then they're going to build housing along that area, as well as retail. And the light rail line is going to be a part of that project as well. So it's a huge thing that hasn't even happened in Seattle. If you look at Seattle, if you look around the arenas, it's just commercial. There's nothing, you can't live there. You can't live by T-Mobile Park now, which is where the Mariners play. Or CenturyLink Field, there's no housing right there. Yeah, kind of a little bit away, but there's no housing right there. There's no village, if you will. This is going to be a pretty substantial project, and that is why the feasibility study is being done, because they're using land that the Parks Department has, and so they're checking them. The city has to make sure that this makes viable sense. To me, now it doesn't really even matter, because we're getting a professional women's soccer team. I mean, it's the highest level that they can go. Sure, it's great having the Tacoma Defiance here, which is also professional soccer, but it's considered more of a minor league. The Reign is really and truly pro sports soccer, like for women. It's the highest level. Now, a sidebar piece to this is that Seattle also has a Major League Rugby team, MLR, sorry. And a lot of people say rugby, well, that's what they said about soccer. If you remember, Major League Soccer was playing in tiny stadiums of 5,000 or so people, and they were in sporadic places. Major League Soccer a few years ago was not that big of a deal. No one cared. And then it slowly started to get bigger, and it demanded more. And so now if you look at where Major League Soccer teams are, they have big stadiums. And in fact, several of my subscribers actually are from Columbus. Columbus set the standard because they built a soccer-specific stadium there for the Crew. So that was kind of like the blueprint going forward. Then when you look at places like Portland, they kind of did the same thing. They took a old baseball field, converted it to a minor league soccer style stadium, and then they expanded it to be a Major League Soccer stadium. Holds over 20,000 people. So my point is that more than likely the rugby teams that you see all over the country are going to start, and there's not a lot of them, but they're going to start requiring much more than just second-rate stadiums. Again, they're playing at Starfire, which is down in Tukwila, but it's not really that adequate. When you're talking about TV deals, which again, let's go back to the Reign, they have Lifetime TV, which will stream those games live. That's a pretty big name. But when you look at the rugby team, right now it's not that big of a deal that they're playing at these little second-rate facilities. I think given another few years, it's going to be very important. And I don't know that here in this area, if the Starfire Center will be up to muster, to be honest with you. So I think that they're going to, is it possible that Tacoma could steal the Major League Rugby team from Seattle? Possible. Because there's no place in Seattle that they can play in. When you look at his soccer field and you look at rugby, the field size is relatively the same size. There's a little bit of difference there, but not by much. And they play kind of overlapping schedules, but rugby is a little bit later. I mean, it starts a month later than soccer, I believe, or a month earlier, one of the two. So it's possible. It's possible. Again, it would be a big thing. Even without Major League Rugby here in Tacoma, having these two teams is a big, big impact for the city. It was a big loss for Seattle. I said that in the video, that having the Reign leave Seattle was a big loss because they couldn't have their full potential there in Seattle. When you see a game between the Portland Thorns and the old Seattle Reign, which is now just called Reign FC, and when they're in Portland, they play at the Major League Soccer Stadium, which, again, Seattle doesn't have a Major League Soccer Stadium. But when you see those games, sometimes they're sold out. 20,000 people are sitting there being as loud and as crazy as you would see at a NFL game. I mean, it's just loud and crazy. So this facility that they're going to build, this stadium is only going to be about 5,000. But I'm sure that it will be designed to easily expand beyond that point. And I think it will be pretty successful. I know that when you look at the Tacoma Defiance, their teams at Cheney have been sold out many times. So it is a really big deal. It's a huge boost for the economy here in Tacoma. I think that a lot of companies and even the Reign were surprised of how underrated Tacoma was. Again, the stereotypes of Tacoma just don't make sense, but people tend to want to believe in those things. And even companies and businesses do. However, it is by far more feasible to do business in Tacoma on many levels than it would be up in Seattle. If you're a sports team, you can't make it in Seattle unless you're a big team and that you're going to have a whole lot of seats. It's just not going to work. Minor league's not going to work there anymore. It's just so expensive. When you look at Tacoma, a lot different type of vibe. It's more of a family-friendly town. You don't have a whole bunch of big corporate places here. So people, their money is not as big, but it makes more sense. People were saying in the comments, why not move them over to Bellevue? Bellevue's even worse than Seattle. You know, like, where would you put it in Bellevue? Where would you put a stadium in Bellevue, anywhere around Bellevue, and that people aren't going to complain about the fact that you have a stadium there? You just can't. Those places have built up long ago, and it doesn't make any sense. And then when you start to go further away from Bellevue, the population centers don't make much sense. You're getting farther away from Seattle. You're getting farther away from a concentrated group of people. Really and truly, the only options that you have are Everett, which is basically a city of, I don't know, not a lot. And then you have Tacoma, which is pushing over 200,000. And the South Sound region, not counting Seattle, has 1 million people. So, of course, this is a market that makes a lot of sense. A lot of people are saying, I don't think they're going to be successful. There's not a lot of people that will go. I disagree. Again, you have 1 million people down in this area. So, obviously, if we can sell out Major League Baseball or Minor League Baseball, we're going to be able to sell out professional soccer. And we've done so again with our minor league team. So anyhow, don't want to keep rambling on about it, but this Heidelberg Sports Village Project, they submitted it back in May, which is similar to the, what's it called, Top Golf. When you look, and I've been checking every day, I've been stalking the city's thing to look at these two projects to see if the RFQs have changed. And they haven't. They're still just saying pending, or they will say under review. They haven't changed what they're doing. It makes me think that the Top Golf, because to kind of go off on a tangent, Top Golf in Tacoma, by the Tacoma Dome, that project has to include something for the parking. there's hundreds of spaces that are going to be lost due to the top, that entertainment district. So the city wanted something that ensures that that parking could be solved. How are you going to solve the parking issue with these spaces lost? Basically saying, are you going to put a parking garage, is what the city is trying to say. Give us a parking garage, and that probably satisfies it. And so I think Topgolf, which paid a lot of money just to bid, I mean, the city required a serious bid, which means that you have to put money down to show your commitment. When you look at Topgolf in Renton, which they have proposed going to Renton, they didn't do that. Renton, and some people here are nervous, but the difference between Tacoma and Renton, which Renton's not that far, is that in Renton, there was no application filed, there was no money put down, and so it's just an exploratory thing, right? And they did blueprints and everything else like that as to what the Topgolf location would look like. It would be a lot more flexible. But the difference is, and the reason why Tacoma is such a target for Topgolf, more so I think than Renton, is the fact that Topgolf down in Tacoma will pull a lot of people from other places. People say, well, what about Renton? It's close to Seattle and Bellevue. It's right there. If you look, basically Seattle is up here, Renton's right down here, and then Bellevue's right up here. But at the same time, when you look at where they're putting supposedly this Topgolf, it's in an area of Renton that they're trying to make very hoity-toity. And I don't know if that fits really well with Topgolf. Topgolf is not super expensive. It's not like a regular golf course. So it appeals more to families. It appeals more to people who are wanting to have a good time and they're able to spend a little bit of money and that type of thing. It's a little different vibe than what Renton is going to offer. And the area that they're trying to develop there in Renton is very hoity. I mean, literally the developer is going to have water taxis that ferry people back and forth from Seattle to Renton and Bellevue to Renton. It's kind of an elite type of area. Just being real. So I don't see that happening as much as down in Tacoma. By the Tacoma Dome, it's a different thing. You have the University of Washington Tacoma, which will be less than a mile away, well, less than 2 miles away. You have a light rail system that is developing into a network. So not only do we have light rail that goes through all of downtown, but also into the medical campus and all of that, but you also will eventually have it connect to stuff like the Sports Village and all the way out to Tacoma Community College. You also have the city that is planning on bus rapid transit line, which will run down the middle of Pacific Avenue, connecting to nearby suburbs. All of that's going to empty right out there at the Tacoma Dome. Not only that, but you have all of these housing developments going on. And if you look at Renton and the developer there, it doesn't hold a candle to the amount of money that's being pumped into Tacoma, which is pushing well past $1 billion worth of investment. It's not the same thing. So Tacoma's being built as a true destination, more so than what Renton is. Renton is basically trying to become the next tech hub of the area. Tacoma is trying to be an important city of Puget Sound, similar to Seattle, but just a different flavor. It's trying to be an important city that has several different types of industries. So as a result, Tacoma is trying to appeal to everything, not just certain specific key things, certain key markets. Renton is trying to appeal to the tech folks and the hoity-toity, and it's trying to be a duplicate, if you will, a carbon copy of maybe a Bellevue. And that's not what's going on down in Seattle or down in Tacoma. Tacoma, similar to Everett, is trying to be a city that stands on its own and develops its own industries that are not just concentrated in one key area. So I think that is much more financially appealing to various different things, not only for Topgolf, not only for minor league teams, because they can't, again, compete in that. Once you bring in high tech, the values of every piece of land around there goes up because people assume that every tech worker is going to make a whole lot of money. So it makes it challenging when you have teams who pay their workers not a lot. The salary cap for the Reign or any of the major the professional female soccer player teams are only at about $200,000. Those folks don't make a lot of money. You can't afford to live up in Seattle. You can't afford to live up in Renton or Bellevue. You're more likely able to live down here, and you don't have to sit and stress out about it as much as you would up there. So the higher the salaries go in those areas, the less likely you're going to have cultural amenities like this. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't make financial sense. So I expect more and more things will start to break away from Seattle, come down here, because Tacoma is trying to branch out in many different areas. It's kind of a blessing that there is no Amazon here, to be honest with you. Because if you bring Amazon, keeping Amazon where it is, whether it's in Bellevue and also in Seattle, is good because you can bring people. It's similar to Bremerton. Bremerton's smart. Tacoma is smart because they're saying, haul all of our people up there and bring the money back. So yeah, we'll figure out how to get you there. With Bremerton, they're using, Kitsap County is using the whole ferry system, and they're using it to cover many cities there. So we'll get you there, bring that money back to the county. Same thing with Tacoma. We'll get you there, bring it back. They don't have to really hold their hand out waiting for an Amazon to give them the time of day. There's no need for it. So they can still keep properties and housing at a much more affordable rate than what you're going to find anyplace else. So I think the Bellevue strategy is way off kilter because it's not really sustainable. Seattle is not sustainable because you're seeing the housing prices plunge, whereas in Tacoma and Bremerton, they're hovering, to be honest with you. They're going up and down, but they're not just drastically dropping like what you're seeing in Seattle. It's not a sustainable thing because there's so much speculation in terms of what's going to happen with housing and all of that type of stuff. It's not a sustainable model anywhere in the world. It just doesn't work. So down here, it's a completely different thing. And you're seeing near the Tacoma Dome, the reason why I think Top Golf is going to eventually happen is because you're seeing all of this development that's happening right there at the Tacoma Dome. If you look back, and I'll get off this in a second, if you look back, Tacoma wanted to make a huge entertainment district all the way in the Tacoma Dome area. Not just where they're talking about Top Golf, I'm talking the entire area. They had plans for high-rises, hotels, various different things. They wanted to create this densely packed community. There's all these master plans that are out there that shows the Dome District being this big monstrosity of a development. And I think they kind of abandoned that and said, let the market do it. So instead, and they were going to have everything concentrated on the Link Light Rail and all of that stuff. But I think they've kind of pulled back from that and said, let's try to figure out how to get people there to these areas, make them much more marketable, have them do the development slowly, and then we start to do a much smaller piece. At one point, instead of having the convention center where it is downtown, it was going to be next to the Tacoma Dome. Right? They wanted to do similar to what Indianapolis did with the RCA Dome. They built the convention center and RCA Dome all together because really to convince the NFL to come to, this is a sidebar piece, but to convince them to come to Indianapolis, they built the RCA Dome before there was even a team. And they also connected the convention center because they said, you know what, if we don't get a team, we can use that dome as exhibition space. And then we can just pray that the NFL will say, oh, you know, you have enough space for NFL team. And it was a way for them to get that built using taxpayer money without people getting upset saying, well, we're not trying to build no stadium. But we're okay for convention business because that helps the city. That's how they got away with it, and that's how they were able to develop it. Well, in Tacoma, they were going to connect the dome and the convention center together in these old plans, and they abandoned that plan for some reason. Probably didn't make a lot of sense. And they decided to move the convention center more into downtown and let the dome stand alone by itself. Sorry, hold on. So anyhow, that was the original plans. They wanted to create something similar to this Heidelberg Village. They wanted to do that back in the day in Tacoma. They abandoned that. Now it seems like where the baseball stadium is and where the new soccer stadium will be. They're trying to do that, but it's a private developer that seems pretty far into it, seems well financed. Again, 5 different companies are behind this project. It seems like it's going to happen. I can't wait. Once there's actual blueprints, I'll show you guys what it looks like. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but it's a pretty substantial development. Anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry for being long-winded. Sorry for being 30 minutes. That's crazy. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.